we're going to hit into our top 25. And these are, simply just an eye test. We're basing off wins and losses. It's just, this is going to be very different than the AP top 25. Realistically, like there's going to be teams that are not on this list that might be on the AP top 25 and vice versa. But we're rewarding people that have played good, killing the teams that haven't played well. So right off the bat, I'm going to talk about our honorable mentions. So under our honorable mentions, we got A&M, Memphis, Notre Dame, NIU. NIU, clearly, they got a good dub. Notre Dame, if they win out, I think they're still a very good team. Memphis, I think they're a solid team. I don't know that they will get into the top 25, but A&M, I think, is a good team, but they just play a hard schedule. And then moving into number 25, we've got Michigan. 24, we got LSU. 23, Clemson. 22, Illinois. At 21, we got Syracuse. Louisville at 20. Boston College at number 9. And then number 18, we've got Nebraska. Right after them, we've got Arizona at number 17. Oklahoma 16, Iowa State 15, Kansas State number 14, Oklahoma State 13, and here's where it gets juicy. Moving into those 12 teams that are fighting for those playoff spots, we've got Utah at 12, Oregon at 11, so pretty big drop-off for them, but again, not a big win against Boise State. And then next, we've got Alabama at number 10, USC number 9, Mizzou at number 8, number 7, Penn State, after a very close game with Bowling Green. Next up, we've got Ole Miss at number 6, Miami number 5, Tennessee, Ohio State, Texas, and Georgia round up our last 4. So this is what we've got. Again, this is something we've come up with, again, off of just looks, wins, losses. Again, even within us 3, there was some that we didn't agree on. I think Texas should be the number 1 team in the country. I don't think Georgia has shown as much as Texas has, but talk to us, guys.
Yeah, first, I just want to real quick allude a little bit more to, every week we go to make our top 25. We clean slate it. We wipe it clean, start from 25, go towards 1. And like I said, we start with a completely clean slate. We don't look at what we had last week and try to stay hot on where we had teams. We're moving forward with this system. We're going to wipe it clean, start fresh. Dave, you just said you think Texas should be over Georgia. I'm going to let Bryant tear you up first, and then I'll get after you right after he gets done.
I can see a world where that's the case, but I think Georgia's just been the best team of the past 3 or 4 years. I think they haven't done anything that shows that they shouldn't be the number 1 team in the country. They have the best players. They probably have one of the best coach and coaching staffs. I just don't see. I get the Texas win at Michigan was really big, but I think Georgia's still number 1, regardless of what Texas has done.
I'm with you, Bryant. It's really, really hard for me to want to move on from this Georgia team and slide a team above them. I don't. It's so hard to even talk about, really, because then again, I want to agree with you, Dave. I really do. Texas does have the best win compared to Georgia. I say that. Let me ask you guys that question. Do you value Georgia's win over Clemson, or do you value Texas's win over Michigan more? I mean, that's really what this comes down to. Which one do you value more? I think both teams showed that they were in full control of both games. Georgia was week 1. Texas was week 2. I think I'm going to lean Texas. Here's why. Clemson was a 13.5-point underdog, I believe, when that game closed. And so that was a farther apart game, right? Georgia was meant to go in and win that game by double digits. When this Texas and Michigan game, it was all over the place. It was 5, it was 6, it was 3. It was back and forth, especially early on. So I'm going to value the Texas win over Michigan more. And Dave, saying that, it makes me want to lean in your direction. But, man, it's Georgia. If you line these 2 teams up right now tomorrow, I'm picking Georgia. I'm picking Georgia all day. So that's why I still do think Georgia cements the number 1 spot.
Well, hear me out. I know you're starting to lean, and get where I'm coming from, but truthfully, you're now convincing me back the other way, because I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, Texas beats Michigan, but it's no shock that Michigan doesn't look great. But then we have Georgia beating Clemson, which you would have asked me before this weekend, I would have said Clemson's probably not that good. But then you see Clemson go out and put 66 points on App State, which is a pretty good team. Maybe they just had to figure it out. I mean, maybe Clemson's better than we thought they were. So I'm like, crap, I don't know. Maybe Georgia should be that number one team. So I'm now leaning more like, okay, I see where you're coming from, and I'm with you with Georgia now. I'm with you with Georgia at number one, because now that I'm looking at Texas, I don't know how good Michigan is. 4 weeks out, it may change. I may be back with Texas because I think that's more of a valuable win. But to tell you the truth, I'm with you on Georgia. Now that, I look at it a different way, I'm with you on Georgia.
Yeah, I think it's a lot closer than, people around the country think as far as 1-2 Georgia, Texas. But like we've been saying, I think you just give the nod to Georgia just because they've been there, they've done it. Yeah, Texas might have a slightly better win than Michigan, but it's hard to pull them off from one spot.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, though, we sit here and now I'm just going to overanalyze everything with this topic, and that's awesome to do. It's a great conversation. But to your point, Bryant, we sit here and talk about Georgia's been there, done that. Hey, Georgia wasn't there doing it last year, and Texas was there doing it last year. So, I mean, now I ask myself, hey, does that lean Texas back to the forefront again of this thing? Maybe should Texas be one? Should we have it just 1A, 1B at this point? Then I look down a little bit further and I see Ohio State at 3. We can sit here and make a case for Ohio State to be the number one team in the country coming into the season. We were right there with Ohio State, was just as talented as Georgia. It was essentially, again, it was 1A, 1B. Is Ohio State, should they be in this conversation to fight for this one spot? I think we have 3 really, really good football teams that are going to battle that out. Does it shake out for them 3 to be at the top at the end? Obviously we're going to have to wait and see on that. What surprises me here is that we've gone this far and we haven't talked about Tennessee at number 4. Made a massive jump in our poll last week. We had them at, I think, 15. That moves them up to number 4. We had them jumping 9 spots, or maybe we had them at 14 or 13. Sorry, the math's not mathing, but I know we had them move up 9 spots here in our notes. And yeah, man, Tennessee has shown me as much as anybody. This is why we have them cemented in here at the 4 spot. And I'm very impressed with everything they've shown so far. The SEC looks great. Not trying to have SEC bias here, but the SEC does look absolutely outstanding. And I also think, man, you could make a case for Miami at number 5. I think really you could make a case for any of these top 5 teams that we have on our list to really push for that one spot. Yes, I do think it's Georgia, Texas gap, but, I'm just trying to make a case for all of them.
Well, going off of that top 25, and I know we're kind of going on different rabbit holes here, but with it being a 12-team playoff, I mean, does that make a difference? Because now you're looking at, if you're going to make it to the national championship, you're playing 4 extra games. I mean, even with the 14 playoff, teams are coming into the playoffs beat up already. You lose a couple guys here and there. You have a couple injuries. Does that make a difference moving forward? Like, let's look at these top 4 teams. Like, what are their depths like? Like, how deep are they at those positions? Let's look at Texas. If Texas loses Quinn Ewers, they still got more Arch Manning that has shown that he's got some potential. But if Georgia losing Carson Beck, what does that look like for them? What does that look like for Ohio State? What does that look like for Tennessee? I think that's something that people haven't thought about quite to this point yet. I mean, I'm sure some people have, but I don't think a lot of people are thinking about this. Like, they're playing 4 extra games. If you're a top seed, you're looking more at 3, but let's say you're a middle of the pack team, you got a couple extra games going in there, and these are going to be not just regular 4 games. These are going to be hard opponents week in and week out. I mean, I think that changes the landscape. I think that changes everything, and I think it truly does show who's the better team, because when we have a 14 playoff, you can show up for 2 games, but 4 games, you're beat up by the end of that.
Well, it's very, very easy for people just to come in here and talk about how Texas has 2 really good quarterbacks. Obviously, they do. Everybody knows Arch Manning's name. We've already talked about him on this show a few times. Obviously, that's where everybody wants to point in that direction. To your point, Georgia did lose their backup quarterback in Brock Vandagriff to Kentucky. So, yeah, it thins them out a little bit at that quarterback position. But Ohio State, in my opinion, is far and away built the best in that quarterback room. They have quarterback Devin Brown, who played in the bowl game for them last year, backing up Will Howard. You have Julian Sayin, who can rip it around, who transferred from Alabama already up to Ohio State. He was a 5-star quarterback. And you have quarterback Aaron Nolan. He was a highly touted recruit as well. this Ohio State team is built far and away extremely deep at every position. If we want to get down to the nitty-gritty and really talk about depth, I think they are built the best to last the long season and make the full stretch. You know, I try not to gamble on injuries. I try not to think about injuries just because you can't predict that. You can't control that. So I try to keep everything like that out of sight, out of mind as it's going through. But yeah, if you want to talk about that piece a little bit, you know, I do think Georgia, Texas, and Ohio State are far and away much better depth-wise than the rest of this remaining top 25.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it for years on end, especially now with the transfer portal. These guys or these teams have 4 and 5 star guys all over the roster. Top 100 transfers that we may not even know about. Really, they're on the team. They're second, third in the depth chart. They could be starting for teams 14 and below ranked on this probably. So yeah, I agree. I mean, these top probably even 6 or 7 teams are just absolutely loaded at every position. So Texas does have a good backup in Arch Manning, but I think any one of these teams will be just fine as long as there's not major injuries across the board.
Yeah, one thing I'll talk about here real quick too is let's give a little bit of love to Mizzou here. We don't spend a whole lot of time talking about Mizzou. We try to keep the homerism out of it, so we really try not to cover them as much as maybe other outlets do. As crazy as that sounds, being our home team. But yeah, man, we have Mizzou up here at this 8 spot. I don't think that's too unrealistic for them. I think that's a really good position for them right now. Things are looking really good. But while I want to bring them up is everybody talked about how easy this schedule was going into this season. They got a capital C, capitalize on this schedule and make a playoff push here. And I totally agree with you. But now we're looking at a Boston College team who has now weaseled their way into conversation to be in the top 25. And we here have them at 19. So this becomes a little bit tougher of a schedule. A Vanderbilt team's on this schedule. Most people laugh at Vanderbilt, but hey, Vanderbilt going and beating that Virginia Tech team that we're extremely high on here. This schedule is getting a little bit tougher. Let's see how Drinkwitz and this program really answers things. Bryant, I guess the biggest question I have for you, because you and I do this every year together, we cry together about Mizzou upsetting us. We laugh together when we somehow turn around and beat the hell out of somebody we shouldn't. Just total Mizzou things. Let's say Mizzou wraps this thing up at 11-1, somehow 12-0. They do beat Alabama. They do beat a Texas A&M. Or maybe let's say they lose to an Alabama. Let's say they find their way to the playoffs is really my question here, Bryant. Do you think a team could come in and cherry pick Eli Drinkwitz off this team? Does Kirby Moore stay around? I'd find it very hard to believe that if all things go as planned and all things go well, that we retain both of those guys going into next season. And I think Kirby Moore is as key of a piece as anybody in this University of Missouri football program.
No, definitely agree. I don't think Drinkwitz leaves. Strictly money speaking, he's like the 4th highest paid coach in the league now. Sadly, I think Kirby Moore is probably the prime candidate to get moved. But if we're going to be like, if Mizzou has aspirations to be like the higher end of the SEC, you're going to get players poached. You're going to get coaches poached. You just got to backfill. Going to this season, I think we've done that at the defensive coordinator position. Our defense is absolutely flying around. We have players all over the field. We don't look like we took a step back after losing 5 guys to the league. I think if just as good, if not maybe slightly better than we were last season. Yeah, we haven't really played anybody, but I think you're right. I think it'd be tough to retain both of them. I think Drink is probably safe. I think he enjoys being coach here. I think he sees the potential with recruiting and in the program itself. But I think Kirby Moore would probably be a prime candidate for a coaching job, probably at a decent school.
So before we get out of here, we are talking about Mizzou, and you talked about this a little bit. You're right, Brian. They've played Murray State and Buffalo, but they've allowed 0 points. I don't care who you're playing. You play 2 games, and you start the season with a new defensive coordinator, plenty of new faces on that defensive side of the football. To your point, they backfilled a ton on that defensive side, and you gave up 0 points in back-to-back games. That's absolutely incredible. You can hang your hat on that. I don't care who the opponents were. When you do it twice, that's something to hang your hat on. That is very, very impressive. I have a bold take in mind. I don't know if I'm ready to drop it yet. I don't know if I'm ready to come out with it yet. We have talked about a team so far tonight where I do think their coach gets removed and gets fired before the season's over. We've talked about Kirby Moore. All I'm going to say is I think Kirby Moore will have a head coaching job on one of the teams that we've talked about tonight where I think they lose their head coach. I'll let you guys decide who you think I'm talking about, but I'm actually pretty confident that this could happen if Mizzou's offense really clicks. I'll let you guys think what you want to think here, and I'll just make it fun.